So, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us to this second YOD mini conference, when our themes are going to be maintaining healthy relationships and dealing with difficult situations. I am Tamar, a YOD psychotherapist, and I will be hosting and facilitating, along with my colleagues, Stephanie Slater and Alex Lai, both of whom are YOD ambassadors. A little bit about me: I'm a psychotherapist and supervisor. In my time, I've worked in a number of organizations, including the National Health, as psychotherapist, supervisor, trainer in some, but today I work in private practice in London with adults, and my particular interest is in navigating the challenges and changes that accompany transitions in life. And I will now pass to Alex to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Tamar. My name is Dr. Alex Lai. I'm a GP as well as a career coach. And I sort of stepped into the foray of mental health and well-being of healthcare practitioners sort of after the junior doctor strikes, but especially when I went through some difficulties during training, when my partner became unwell and they had their first sort of mania with psychosis episode with us together, and then I went less than full-time during training, and so now I spend time supporting less than full-time trainees as well as supporting those returning from sickness back into training, and I also run a workplace wellbeing organization called the Work Well Doctors.
Thank you, Alex. And Stephanie, can we hear from
Hi.
you, please?
Yeah, sure. I'm Steph. Hi, everyone. I am a GP trainee, and I got involved with YOD through the Instagram because I've got a social media platform where I just really share my own mental health journey. I got diagnosed with anxiety and depression in 2019, and I've done loads of learning and reflection since then, and I'm really interested in mental health. And yeah, I spend my time outside of work just trying to promote people to look after themselves, and hopefully helping my short story can help a little bit. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here chatting with you guys today.
Thank you, Steph. So a little bit about the etiquette for this thing. If you like, please have your cameras on, but keep yourselves muted for the time being. We would welcome you to put any comments or chat or questions for the panelists into the chat box, which we will pick up either as we go or at the end when we'll have time for discussion. And then before I sort of get any further, a huge thanks to our sponsors, Draeger UK and the British Association of Clinical Care Nursing, who sponsor the charity and enable us to do what we're doing. Okay, so our themes this evening, in which I plan to sort of be in discussion with Alex and Steph, are maintaining healthy relationships and dealing with difficult situations. And what we're planning to do is take maybe a short break between one theme and another, so you can grab a cup of tea or something. But we might pick up chat or, comments or questions as we go along. So can I first say to, well, Alex, when you come across this theme, maintaining healthy relationships, what comes to your mind?
I think primarily taking from my own sort of experience that it's not easy. And so I'm by no means an expert necessarily. All I can tell you is what I've learned along the way. And in terms of healthy relationships, obviously we learn a lot through medicine about comm skills and the way we treat our patients. But do we have those healthy relationships with ourselves and with our spouses or partners or loved ones? Because I think with medicine, we go through so much, and it's about whether or not we're talking about those things that we face, or talking to others about the troubles that we face. And certainly that was one of the first lessons that I faced, because when my partner became unwell, we didn't tell anyone and sort of just tried to muddle through it. Whereas now it's, you know, our lesson is to seek support early, to be a bit more open. Obviously I had to get permission, but essentially also for myself, making sure that I was being a bit more honest. And now I can see that in others and hopefully give the space for others to be able to talk about whatever they're facing.
Thank you, Alex. That's a little brief introduction from you. And how about you, Steph?
Yeah, definitely. Also, apology, guys, that I'm just coughing in the background. I'm recovering from a cold. So when I'm doing this, or if I disappear for a second, that's why. Apologies. So I mean, I would echo quite a few things of what Alex is saying. I think when I think of relationships, especially as we're in the kind of healthcare profession, I tend to think relationships outside of work and relationships inside of work, and working on both of them. I think outside of work, for me, the biggest thing that I've learned loads about over the last few years is, as Alec mentioned, that relationship with ourselves, and that growth of kind of learning about yourself, taking care of yourself, putting your own health first, and really nurturing that relationship to allow you to have good relationships with others, but also to put yourself in a good state of mental health to be able to deliver good care for your patients or do whatever job you're doing the best that you can. And I think by looking after yourself and putting yourself first, that is the basis of how we achieve those things. And I also think another thing that we were kind of touched on the other day, and I think is interesting, is just about boundaries as well in relationships, and making sure that, you know, when we're, you know, yes, what boundaries are okay for you, and that's a personal thing. So you know, I when I was much younger, and still am to an extent now, always had this people pleaser role. And I think if you're in the healthcare profession, you really want to look after others and you want to do what you can, but at what point are you stopping and saying, hang on, this is actually what I need to do for me, or actually this is detrimental to my health, or this is detrimental to the relationship with so-and-so. And at work, it can be really tricky, right? So at work, if you're working in a hospital, you're both in person and on the phone with loads of different people all the time. You've got that balance of like trying to maintain relationships, even if it's just a phone conversation relationship, and how do you kind of have a healthy go on that, especially if you're feeling stressed or if you're feeling rubbish on that day. And then you've got those team working relationships. And I think my favorite jobs throughout my foundation years were always the ones where we worked together as a team and we all cared about each other, and we did like fun things inside and outside of work to keep each other going. We'd bake things, we'd check in, you know, the MDT multidisciplinary team have been so key. I was just talking to someone about it today in my learning, and also my job as a doctor. I could not have done it without the nurses, pharmacists, health HCAs, physios, everyone. And I think so getting the communication right to allow a good team working and have healthy relationships at work, I just think is so key as well.
Well, yes, and I did ask you to talk about it in the context of your work, but I think there's something that we can quite often overlook, as I discovered for myself, which is that when we are in work, it's all too easy for our relationship to ourselves to be tied to our work role. And actually, it's all about what we do and how we do it in work. Whereas there's a real importance of having what Nigella Lawson, Times columnist, wrote about quite early into lockdown days, of the importance of weak ties, the importance of a few words with your local postman or the person who's you bump into, or having a conversation with someone in a shop that actually reminds us that we are human beings in the world, and it's an opportunity to just be spontaneous. It doesn't have to be about anything consequential, but it puts us back in touch with ourselves, which you, Steph, referred to as being in touch with ourselves for who we are, not just for what we do. Does that make any sense to either of you, what I just said?
Yes, of course. You know, clearly there's, you know, we've got Mental Health Awareness Month, and it's about tackling loneliness, and we know that that's what we lost for a multitude of people, having those relationships and those 7 points of human interaction a day. And the same goes for when we were in hospital or when we were in GP and we lost those corridor conversations. And they were the ways that we were maintaining, you know, there's evidence that even if you're just in a room silent with each other and you can smile at each other and you're in that company, that's still better for your mental health than working from home alone. And clearly there's something to be said for how important our community is to us as doctors, because we go through this great, you know, difficulty. We face things as caregivers that a lot of other professions don't experience outside of the NHS. But as Stephanie mentioned, there is a real pressure there to give that. And we know that the NHS has given so much goodwill and of their own time and effort that for the future of the NHS, we do need to put in those healthy boundaries. We do need to make sure that we aren't always trying to rescue the patient. You know, they aren't helpless, they aren't a victim. And, you know, we need to step out of that drama triangle between, you know, there being a villain, a rescuer, and a victim, because actually the patient isn't helpless. And so if they constantly come to us and say, you know, doctor, the hospital haven't given me an appointment, I need this, or just one more problem, you know, it's not sustainable. So we have to make sure that we feel able to empower them and feel that we are able to say no and draw a line in the sand somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with those words, Alex. And just to kind of touch upon what you mentioned, Tamar, about the weak links. I mean, I think all of us to some extent can definitely recognize that as how COVID has affected things. And the second time I got super unwell with anxiety 2 times, to the point where I wasn't really functioning very well. One time I was just crying constantly, and one time I got to a point where I couldn't leave the house because I was just getting really so anxious. And that's not to belittle it, but what I found caused that and led to that in the second time was just that lack of human social interaction. And I worked out I'd had about 8 weeks of no face-to-face conversations with anyone for about more than a minute. And that was because we were social distancing at work. I was working in a GP practice and I was living by myself. And I'd never had, you know, we talk about loneliness, don't we, in the context of you can feel lonely even not when you're not alone. And that's so real as well. But experience that full isolation and then reflecting that back on, I mean, and, you know, learning for our patients and stuff, reflecting that back on people who do live alone all the time and who don't see many people. And, you know, that realization of how horrible that can be, and that importance of having those weak links as you described them, Tamar, and just like with anyone. So, you know, now not even talking about relationships with ourselves, relationships with work, relationship with loved ones. It's actually also about just relationship with strangers, and chats at the bus stop, like you were saying, and how nice it can be, and the importance of that, and how we get that out there, really. I mean, because I would think with COVID, it's so difficult because obviously no one really wants to go near each other still. So.
Yeah, and you've both sort of made reference to, it's not just about us making use of those weak links to remind ourselves of who we are, but it's also encouraging our patients to do the same for themselves. Because yes, people have been living alone or with very little face-to-face interaction, and for some people now, even if restrictions have been lifted, it becomes a little bit scary. Do I really want to go out there again and risk it again? But in the meantime, one can get a bit sort of lost and drifting around, and it adds to the isolation.
I think the other part of this sort of title was maintaining friendships. And as busy clinicians or NHS staff working shift work, or often having to do a lot of extra work or revision or exams on the side, I just, even though it sounds obvious, it bears repeating that it is important to prioritize these things, because they are so key to refilling our bucket that gets taken out of by patients or the things that we face day to day. Because you know, it's very easy for these things to fall down on the priority list, and so even if internally you may feel, oh, I haven't reached out to this person, the other person may be experiencing that too. It may be difficult to catch up, but actually those friends who you have been keeping in contact with throughout the pandemic, really do remember to reach out. You know, everyone, in the same way that we would have corridor conversations, doesn't mind a little text. There doesn't have to be pressure behind responding, but just that reaching out. You can almost say, you know, oh, I went to a workshop this afternoon and it made me think about reaching out to you, because it is key to keeping up those connections. And I'm sure you're all aware, you know, we have those groups, and it's about making sure that we plan those things in to look after them, to look forward to them, but also to maintain those friendships.
Yes, and actually, paradoxically for me, now that I was largely working from home, but then largely on my own or on Zoom, I did have more time to reflect, because I wasn't having to travel from place to place and so on. And actually, somewhat paradoxically, it highlighted the importance of maintaining the friendships by whatever means we could, which was often to put a date in the diary to have a conversation. And some of those friendships that were, to begin with, quite distant friendships that we only met in passing, have blossomed because we've made a point of sharing with one another and reaching out, as you say. And one of the things to perhaps remember as we get back to a busier world, we think, is the importance of these things, and not to lose them as we go forward. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, something to touch upon that you guys have mentioned as well, but just like to be not devil's advocate to it, but to look at the flip side as well, is I think, Alex, you mentioned that, you know, people who you might not have spoken to for a really long time in any situation, not just in COVID, you might both be sat there thinking, oh, why haven't they contacted me? Or, oh, why haven't I contacted them? And the importance of not taking things personally. And I think it's something that I learned in cognitive behavioral therapy, is that it's just never about you. And trying to remember that and reapply it and keep reminding yourself of that is just so important, because it's so easy to take things personally, especially, but you've got to think about it like it's probably something to do with the other person. They're probably stressed. What are they going through? Whereas we tend to see that other people's actions are a reflection on us, and they hardly ever are. And learning that and practicing that has been so useful for me in helping my relationships, because I still have moments, especially tending to be an anxious person. I do worry about things, but nowadays much more and more my relationships can be healthier, because I'm not immediately assuming that because someone hasn't messaged me, they don't like me anymore. You know, it's more like, oh, they're probably busy. Like, you know, there's probably another reason. And so working on how we maintain those relationships through working on ourselves and through working on our self-relationship is just, it's so important at work, outside of work, everywhere, and especially with times like COVID where isolation is pretty major.
And the converse of that, for someone like me, who used to be thinking, oh, they're probably busy, I shouldn't contact them now, because I would usually do it by phone, and then actually reminding myself, well, if they're busy, they'll say so, and then we can arrange another time. Because if somebody phones me up when I don't have time to speak, I tell them, and we arrange to speak when both of us are going to be free. So it's, again, it works two ways, but it's easy to forget that and get very sort of self-absorbed in it all.
Definitely.
And one of, you know, the things that I missed, which I think is the equivalent perhaps of what you, Alex, call corridor conversations, was when I was working in you know, within an organization, I suppose I'd call them the tea room conversations, where you just bump into people and have a quick share of what's going on, rather than having to carry everything but yourself all day long without speaking to anyone.
Absolutely. And, you know, I talk about how key this is to workplace wellbeing, because we know that actually having that little bit of a rant and having that debrief in between patients is so important to just getting a bit of respite, taking off some of that load from your shoulders. You know, there's a difference between, you know, one of the greatest tips is, you know, would you like me to just listen, or would you like me to offer solutions? You know, actually, sometimes you just need a rant, and you need to be able to moan about the patient or someone that you've dealt with at work or at home. And then other times, maybe it is more appropriate to have more of a coaching approach, where it's sort of, you can come up with your own solutions, and sort of maybe not thinking about your supervisor as someone that is penalizing you, or maybe actually, you know, the GP that snapped at you in the corridor isn't actually angry at you. And then maybe that's actually where that corridor conversation comes into play, that you need to go and, you know, actually say to them, are you okay? And, you know, that's the whole point of "you okay, doc?" It's, are you okay? Are you really okay? Obviously ask that in the capacity where you have the space and the time to actually address that. But more often than not, you know, once we've got past the Britishness of "I'm fine," then actually they go, "Oh no, actually, sorry, I snapped at you earlier. I was in a rush. My kid's sick. I need to finish work and get home to pick them up," whatever it may be, or something's going on in their life. Something's going on in everybody's life. The number of people that have no idea what's going on for any of us. And as long as you have those connections, however many it may be, depending how introvert or extrovert you are, it's having those connections and making sure that you do maintain them, make sure that you do plan in to have a check-in with them, however much works for you, because actually we know that that is good for your health and your mental health and your well-being, and it's necessary to be able to get through and thrive in such a difficult career with such difficult circumstances, you do need to just have a good old natter, but also sometimes not talk about medicine, sometimes not talk about COVID. And sometimes actually, a nurse said to me, she had put in during COVID a sort of memo to the WhatsApp group being like, hey guys, tonight, can we not talk about COVID? Because it was all she talked about at work. It was, you know, driving up her anxiety. And actually, I don't want to be talking about, you know, how I'm dealing with anti-vaxxers, and I don't want to be at work. I want to switch off.
Yeah, and I think you triggered something in me about the importance of having a natter and actually talking, because these days it's all too easy and quick to do everything by text or by email or somehow remotely. And what you don't get then is the tone. You don't, hearing another human voice and picking up from them, not just what they said, but how it's said. Because it's all too easy when we're reading stuff to read it in a way that may not have been intended in the first place. So I think, you know, there have been times when I've literally picked up the phone to have a rant with someone about the fact that I've been, you know, trying to do something, and the only way that I can do it is supposedly online, and it's not working, and I need to talk to someone.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, again, another thing, sort of tip we would recommend is having that debrief before you get home. So in order to maintain those healthy relationships with the people you live with, whether that's family or spouse or anyone, sometimes it may be necessary on that drive home, on that walk home, on that bus ride, to give a friend a call or speak to someone via text, whatever works, just to let it off, because actually we don't want it to always bleed into our home life. We want to do that breathing exercise, do that bit of reflection. And sometimes that reflection is best through a friend or a colleague who understands what's going on, because then we don't want to take all of our stuff home.
You don't want to offload it on the loved ones. I agree. And just while I remember something that I picked up on that you said, Alex, because it's something that I experience all that time, is that worry of when you ask someone, are they okay? You worry about what you're going to get back. You worry that, oh my God, gosh, do I have time to deal with this? Am I the right person to be taking on this other person's stress? And I'm sure I'm not alone in having that moment where I'm like, do I really want to ask if they're okay? And that's not because I'm a horrible person. That's because I'm thinking, oh, I've got to do this and I've got to do this and I've got to get this done. And obviously respect your boundaries. Obviously it depends where you are at that moment in time. Please don't think we're saying to everyone, definitely take it on. But as you said, it is usually can be something simple, and it's usually something that you can help with. And I think even just saying to a person, if you're really worried about them, or if you're thinking something's not quite right, even if you say to them, are you okay? And they say, actually, no, fine. You might not have loads of time at that moment, but you can say to them, you know, I care about you and I'd love to, like, should we talk about this later? Like, I've literally got a load of stuff on, but can we talk about this? Because I really want to listen and I want to help. And that moment of the anxiety of like, oh, I don't actually think I can help this person, that can be put to the one side, because really what matters is whether you care. And I think like showing that you care to someone and showing that you will make time for them, even if it's not right there and then, that's okay as well. So I don't know if anyone else has had that, but something I get.
That makes absolute sense. Yeah, no, absolutely. It is key. And like you said, God forbid anyone is suicidal, but otherwise it's not going to be an emergency. It's taking that point. It's that act of kindness and compassion. And then there will be time later to discuss it, you know, like it's the fact that you've offered. Yeah.
And they know, as long as they know you care, that's what matters. But yeah, and it's surprising sometimes how many people it's happened, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, the amount of people who surprise you in that, you know, sometimes you ask if someone's okay and you know the answer you're going to get, it's probably going to be no, and they're probably going to tell you about their whole life, and in a nice way, like just catching up, whatever. But sometimes it's the people that surprise you that turn around and say no, and you're like, oh gosh, and you can be that person for them. And it's not about worrying that you're going to have to take this on forevermore. It's just about being that kind person in that moment and seeing if you can make someone stay, because often it does, when if you can give that small act of kindness. Yeah.
And I think there's another thing about talking to people. I passed someone the other day, a colleague who actually said, oh, for goodness sake, I've been trying to deal with this and it's driving me, crazy. And I actually thought, oh, it's not just me who finds this difficult. There can be a huge relief in hearing from someone that they're having a similar difficulty over something. And then, then there was a little conversation, well, what did you do? Well, I did this and I did that, and you share. But the thing about often, if one's finding things a bit difficult, some of us have a tendency to think, oh, well, it must be me, everybody else is coping, it's just me that finds it difficult. But
and I think, sorry.
No, carry on.
Well, you segued perfectly into my next point, which mind the plug, is peer support. Actually the benefits of peer support in maintaining our healthy relationships is so key. We know that whether you're in ENT or a surgery or GP, we tend to form little communities, whether you're like the nursing team in critical care or the physio group in the community. It's having that support, the MDT that Steph mentioned at the very beginning, and being able to talk about the issues you're facing. And so certainly, one of the benefits that we've seen in the UK doc huddles is actually recognizing that you're not alone in what you're experiencing, making sure that you don't feel alone. That's why Steph talks openly about what's going on. It's trying to tackle that stigma of thinking that you're the only one who is finding the exam hard, or finding it difficult to deal with patients or relatives or grief or trouble at home because they don't understand why you're constantly doing shift work or having to revise for the next exam. And so leaning into that support, making sure you set up those support networks. So sadly in GP training, you've kind of lost a bit of the CSA, which is our exam formation, because you don't practice together necessarily, but it's still important to form those groups, because they will become your peer support group for the rest of your career.
I've got my GP gals. We have a little GP gals group, and
perfect.
One of my colleagues at work is another trainee, and we're really close and good friends. And I think, just to reiterate it, I know we've said it, but you are literally never alone. And I think, like, when I've been really, really unwell with my mental health, and when I've been at my worst times and not wanting to be here anymore, the loneliness and the alone, and feeling like no one will ever understand what I'm going through, and nothing can help, and all the horrible emotions that you can feel at that time. But the loneliness and being alone is something I remember so strongly, because, even though I'm surrounded by people, no one understands and no one gets it. But learning that you're never alone, in terms of there's always someone you can talk to, things will get better. There's, in whatever sense, as you said, you're just never alone with whatever it is you're going through. And even if you reach out to someone, and this is slightly more mental health related, so sorry, but even if you reach out to someone and you don't get the response that you were expecting, or you get a response that was a bit of a brush off or whatever, that still doesn't mean you're alone. Go to someone else. There's always someone you can talk to. And even if that's in work, if you've escalated something and it's not really being respected or whatever, go to someone else. I think empowering everyone to, like, one, look after themselves, but also just recognize that they're deserving of support and deserving of help and teamwork and everything else is just so key, so important.
Yes, and I think here the fact that we are doing so much more online has really helped, because, for example, I'm now in a peer supervision group, where somebody's in Spain, somebody else is in Canada, but we all get together and discuss, you know, what we're encountering in our work and all the rest of it. And also we can do it more easily, even leaving aside how distant some people are. There's no traveling. You can set it up to run for an hour or 2 hours, and you know that you're done by then. You don't have to get there and then get back. So there are some advantages to having become more reliant and for some of us a little bit more tech savvy than we were before.
Definitely. I wonder, just looking at the time, we were going to see if there's any kind of questions that anyone had. And I also wondered, there might not be any specific questions from our audience, but I did wonder if anyone had any experiences that they wanted to share about relationships or difficulties that they've had, or anything they've particularly picked up on. If not, I'm sure me, Alex and Tamar will be happy to continue chatting and sharing our own experiences before we have a bit of a break. But if anyone would like to share anything, it would be great to hear or great to see what you've related to so far.
And if you would like to either put it into the chat box or use the hand sign in the reactions thing to let us know that you're there, and we'll come to you.
I've just seen, we've got a question in the chat, which I can read out for us, or rather a musings. And Amelia just wondering if we can share our thoughts on that. So Tamar and Alex, I'll just read it out. So just for everyone else as well. So the conversation that we listened to made me wonder about what is really valuable and valued in a relationship. What makes it healthier and richer? And what are the limiting factors that jeopardize a relationship? For example, being genuine. I would think that would add to healthy relationships, but being vulnerable, people can use that to hurt you back, and that makes people closed off. What are the ingredients that we all ought to cultivate to generate healthier relationships with others and with ourselves? I would appreciate if you can share your thoughts on that. And I'm so sorry, Amelia, I've definitely paraphrased that in certain places, but that's the gist. Do you want any thoughts, Tamar, Alex?
You're muted, Tamar. I think I will let the psychologist speak first. Oh, no, you go.
Well, I think it is hard, but I think one of the things that enables people to open up and share and be themselves is actually the sense that we all want, that we are being listened to, being heard, and being understood. And that is about actually listening. When so often in life, when somebody's talking, we're busy thinking of what we're going to say next, when actually listening and then reflecting back what you think you've heard as a start of a conversation is certainly one of the things that I think helps, that feeling that you're being listened to. What do you think?
So there's two.
Or do you want to go?
There's two things here. One of them is taking on board this, you know, thank you for asking this question. I'm sorry if someone did use your authenticity against you, and I would say perhaps that's not the right, you know, that may not have been appropriate, and that's may not have been therefore the right person for you, but that doesn't mean that it's the wrong thing to do. Ideally, we all want to find people who resonate with us, where we can be our genuine selves, where we don't have to put up a wall or, you know, always be brave or always be knowledgeable, and be able to be authentic and own up to our mistakes. And that's not always easy. And everyone comes with their own baggage and their experience. And certainly, you know, from my sort of upbringing and my interactions with my partner, it was difficult because too often I did step into trying to problem solve everything, and providing the answers or my own experience. And as Tamar said, it's about learning to actually listen, and listen without going, right, you know, okay, we need to get this help and speak to this person, and you know, you should do this, and we need to start looking at eating better for mental health and exercising more, and all of the solutions that we're used to doing as clinicians, but actually going more into the coach space and going, what do you need? What would you like to do? You know, what are your options? What things do you think are going to help you? Where do you envision us? You know, ideally in healthy relationships, it is about a joint understanding of each other. What are your expectations? Another great difficulty was a mismatch of expectations, and whose expectations are we trying to meet? Is that putting pressure on the relationship? And maybe being open if hopefully we're able to have those mature conversations about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo a lot of what you guys are saying. I would say 3 things are coming up mostly for me. Communication is massive, as you guys have just discussed, but literally every breakdown in a working relationship I've ever had has been because of poor communication, whether that's like literally written poor communication, or whether it's someone said something differently and someone didn't understand it, or whether it's not being open. And also just in day-to-day relationships with people, you can see sometimes when you see friendships or relationships and you think, oh, they're just not getting at the right bit, they're like hitting the wrong level and haven't got that communication right. So that is major. Being honest, I honestly find being honest, it can be really tricky sometimes, but being is one of the best ways that I connect with people, is just being honest. And that doesn't mean shoving, just as Alex said and Tamara has touched on about, it doesn't mean shoving your views on someone, but if asked, and if you're asked to share something, trying to be as honest as you can. And also, I mean, I think what I see, and this is a kind of bit of a weird one, but what I see as a healthy relationship or a good relationship is one when both people want the other one to be happy. And it doesn't mean like making the other one happy or feeling like it's their job, but like that's what they want for the other person. And I think sometimes when you realize you're in a relationship, when with any kind of relationship, and that's what gives me joy. So if I'm in a friendship with someone and they get happy when I get happy, I'm like, oh, isn't this nice? And you know, you'll recognize those healthy relationships where you're not jealous of stuff, you're not like hating on someone, you kind of want the best for them. And also just to say as well, and this is like a kind of sidebar and not really about working relationships change all the time, and you, as you grow, will grow into certain relationships, out of certain relationships. Yeah. People can be passing ships, sometimes you're close to people, sometimes you're not, and that's all okay. Especially like I mean I am now 30, so I'm now mature, but like, you know, especially as I was growing up, you know, you just, I mean, I still feel like an 18-year-old, but inside. But you know, I think that as you're growing up, it was so major to me that I was like not losing friends, but drifting from people or whatever. But I think as you like get older, and same with work, I'm sure it is, if you're in the same place for a long time, that's just, it's all weaving in and out, and it's all going to change, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. And the thing you can do is try and surround yourself with positivity and good relationships, as well as being that positive and good relationship side to things as well. That's what I would say. I
think your analogy there you're looking for is that we're all growing. We're all growing. We're always changing. We're always learning new things. So as you mentioned, I love the passion ships analogy, because we will go and work at different trusts, and we will, you know, bond with people and form a small community with our F1s or our F2s or our GP group, because you're in a situation together. But then you'll find certain ones that actually you resonate with because you have the same values and priorities. And again, that may change as people get married or have kids, and their values are a bit different, or their priorities are a bit different. And that's, as Stephanie said, okay.
Yeah, and each of you referred to something in your own way. Steph, with paraphrasing, it's often helpful to someone when you've heard them to say, so are you saying, and putting it into your own words, that will give them a sense of whether you've heard them right or not, and they can then correct you if they haven't. And the other one, which Alex referred to, is actually asking, if somebody's got a problem, what would help you, rather than assuming that we know what would help.
And the last thing,
the
last thing I want to touch on, you said, what are the ingredients? And Steph touched on, you know, how we communicate and what each person needs. Actually, there's I think a psychologist or a doctor who came up with the 5 love languages, and it's really useful. And there's a free quiz if you Google search the 5 love languages, and then there's a couple of books, and it kind of applies to sort of all manners. But basically, we all have different ways of showing that appreciation. So where Steph mentioned about making the other person happy, and that's how she finds the joy. You know, some people like receiving gifts, some people words of affirmation, some people it may be through acts of service. And it's about working out what their love language is, because it may not always be obvious, and therefore there may be clashes in the relationship when you don't understand each other's love language, and actually you're misinterpreting, or may feel a lack of love in that relationship because they don't respond in the same way that you show your love.
Definitely. And I know we've got to move on quickly because we're running off a little bit, but just a quick note on that one about the love languages is one of the books that I suggested, and we have like a UOK doc book club, is a book called Attached, which is about attachment styles. And if anyone is interested in that, it literally explained why my relationship with my ex was never going to work. And I was like, mind blown. I was like, this is amazing. I learned so much from it. So if anyone's interested in psychology, I do recommend the book Attached. And I literally did a love languages quiz yesterday, Alex. Came up on a that I was at the other weekend. So I was like, oh, yeah, sorry, we're running over a little bit.
So, yes, so shall we move on now to the dealing with difficult situations, whether that's a situation at work or difficult people that you come into contact with. What comes to mind for you? I think you've referred quite a bit to it already, Steph.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I think difficult situations obviously can be interpreted in so many different ways. I think the thing that I think about, especially working in healthcare, is on the theme of relationships and difficult situations within relationships is, you know, how do you manage those moments where people clash, and how do you manage those moments where you're not on the same wavelength and the communication isn't working, and, you know, what can you do, and what kind of support can you get as well? So, I mean, I think as we said, difficult situations can mean anything. I can think of stuff in my training where I've unfortunately had supervisors, for example, who have been, when I've been the kind of wanting help, maybe not said that directly, but gone to them crying or gone to them really stressed or whatever else, and unfortunately gotten given back, instead of given back a vibe of, oh, let's see how we can get you some support. Do you want to go see your GP? Do you want to go, you know, how can we support you through this? I was actually told in one of my supervisor feedback moments that I was too empathetic to be a doctor, and that was just the end of the meeting, and I left crying. I was already crying, and I cried some more, and I rang my mum, and I was like, Mum, apparently I'm not supposed to be a doctor because I'm too empathetic and I have too many emotions. And it was just, anyway, I took that so like to the heart, because you do, I think, when you get these kind of feedbacks from seniors. And why I'd mention it now, although it doesn't quite come in with the difficult relationships, is that, or difficult situations, is that now, if that type of thing happened to me, so now if I was in a situation, having been really unwell with my mental health and having learnt loads and had CBT and all these like interesting psychology things, and I actually wouldn't, despite how unwell I was at certain points, I personally wouldn't change it. It's not to say it was horrible, but I've learned so much, and that's been really great for me. But now, if that difficult situation came about, I know that I would have the confidence to say, hang on a minute, no, that's not, I'm not gonna sit here and accept that I'm too empathetic to be a doctor. I don't think that's correct. And even if I felt intimidated in that moment, or that I couldn't say anything at that point, I would feel confident enough to take that to someone else, or escalate it, or try and sort that situation. And I think knowing your worth, it's not about necessarily being combative or attacking people or going back on the defense, but just really knowing your worth in difficult situations can be so important. Because I think as junior doctors, we know, we come into it like, oh, we're the runts of the litter, we know we're the bottom of the pack. We almost subconsciously make that worse by thinking, I don't know what I'm doing, because you don't know what you're doing. I was speaking to an F1, someone who's about to be an F1 soon, and I was like, don't worry, no one knows what they're doing. Everyone is freaking out, like no one has a clue. Like you can pretend to be a doctor, sorry, medical student isn't pretending, but you can act as a doctor all you want, but until you've got that responsibility, no one knows what's going to really happen and how it's going to be. And I think just knowing that you are deserving of support, and that if things come up, you have a right to, have your voice heard, is just so useful. Because there's many situations where I've not been treated very well, or a colleague's not been treated very well, and not feeling, and going back into that, and again, that talking about feeling alone that we were doing before, you feel like you're the only one that it's happening to. You can sometimes feel in those situations that there's no way out of things, but knowing that you can get help, and knowing that it's okay to ask for help, especially, as anyone, but especially as junior doctors and anyone who's kind of training. And I think unfortunately in the NHS, it's not talked about enough, the need for peer support, but also senior support, and just having the ability to be open about stuff. Really just even talking about mental health, I feel has only escalated more with the pandemic, and was recognizing that actually there's a mental health pandemic alongside the COVID pandemic. So yeah, that would be my kind of takeaways on dealing with relationships, and maybe not necessarily the specifics, but just kind of the feelings and the ways of getting around them, and keeping knowing your own self-worth really in those situations.
How about you, Alex?
You've totally touched on there the fact that not only should you seek support, but that there is support available. As Steph mentioned, if you go down one avenue, try another. But interpreting sort of difficult situations, I think obviously with my background, it was knowing that I should ask for help, because actually it was difficult and challenging, because no matter what, we're always going to face something at some point in our career. Someone's going to get sick, our parents are going to get old, our child will get ill, something will happen where work can't be our entire focus and our priority. And it's how we recognize in ourselves that actually we need to access some support, see your GP, speak to occupational health, access staff support, access duty care, frontline 19, you OK doc, and know that is there, as well as your friends. The other thing is that I learned sort of that we can be proactive, because sort of resilience is not just about bouncing back. It's about, growing from each episode that happens. We're always growing and learning, so we're not going back to the same point, but also that it doesn't always have to happen after a difficult situation, but we can actually prepare for difficult situations. So we can plan for when we've got an exam coming up or a difficult period of night shifts, and ask for help and think about what we're going to do so that our well-being doesn't dip because we haven't seen anyone or are only eating things from the hospital. And then the other thing is, with any difficult situation, I think Steph mentioned earlier, we can't always control how other people will respond, but we can control how we will respond. So earlier today, I was talking to receptionists about how they're dealing with patient abuse and the fact that they expect to pick up the phone and be shouted at. And sometimes it's about perspective and recognizing that, you know, when we face an angry relative, why are they angry? Okay, it's difficult, and you know, we don't take abuse in healthcare, but also, is it more because they're scared? Can we think of another perspective about what's going on? Because actually they don't have the privilege that we do of understanding how the healthcare system works, and they're in a new environment and they don't know what's going on, and they feel a lack of control over what's going on. Their frustration isn't necessarily directed at us. So can we make sure that before we respond, we pause, perhaps we do, you know, a 10-second breathing technique to just pause so that it doesn't affect us, because we only have control over our response. And actually, I don't want to let one patient ruin my entire day. And therefore, if I do either box breathing or sort of inhale again and breathe out through the mouth, I can take a pause before I respond. Which
I put slightly differently, and to anyone who remembers, I'm not sure if it's Alice in Wonderland or Alice Through the Looking Glass, the 3 R's, which were then reading, writing, and arithmetic. I have it as react, which we will do immediately to a difficult situation or somebody being difficult towards us. Reflect, which is that pause, actually what is going on here, and then respond. And the response maybe you referred to it earlier, Steph, in that it's not necessarily about us, even if somebody's shouting at us, it's something in their lives that has got them into that state, and maybe asking, what is it about the situation that's really upsetting you? You know, rather than assuming that you know the answer because of the way it's been put. So again, it's listening, and maybe listening to what's not said, or to use a phrase I've recently come across, which is compassionate inquiry. I want to understand what's difficult for you so that I can help.
Definitely. I mean, I think that's it, isn't it? It's showing that we care, the compassionate understanding, you know, showing that we really care and that we want to help. And I mean, I think, you know, as we said, there's just so many different difficult situations that you can encounter. And I mean, I would agree, I do box breathing whenever I'm having a stressful situation. And, you know, even today there was someone, and I remember all the things that we've just spoken about, but even just to give a real life example, today there was a relative of a patient who came onto the call, was immediately quite shouting at me and in a quite aggressive manner, and just kept going on and on and on. And it wasn't really about anything to do with me. I'd not had an interaction with the patient before. And so it does feel really difficult, because you're like, oh, what, you know, what well, firstly, I'm like, oh, great, I'm being shouted at. I was like, I'm too tired for this. But secondly, I was like, okay, how do I even deal with this? Because I've not been involved. And sometimes it does feel rubbish. And yes, apologize, but it does sometimes feel underwhelming to just be like, I'm so sorry, because I can't change the past. And the patient knows that. And, you know, they do know that, but you can't change the past. You can't do anything about that. And then it's just about shifting that focus to moving forward. How can I help now? What can I do in this moment? And I think the biggest thing for him although I necessarily didn't want to have it, but was to let the person rant and to let the person just get it all out, because, you know, it's actually, as much as it's really not nice to be shouted at, and it takes a while. And I fully advocate people, when they've had those kind of consultations, afterwards just going, just like having a moment, doing the box breathing, which in case any of you don't know is you can do it for all sorts of different seconds, but breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4, or you can do 6 or whatever seconds, not minutes. And then, yeah, I think just recognizing that, looking after yourself, but also just realizing, okay, I can actually make a difference. Even though this patient or this patient's relative or whoever is having a rubbish time, actually me just sitting here, letting them get it all out, and then moving forward and making a plan together. And it can be so tricky, I guess, you know, as we're covering such a wide spectrum, I find it really difficult in those ones where you don't get the resolution. And there'll definitely be phone calls or times in hospital or wherever anyone's working, or not in medicine, where you don't have that resolution of, and you come off and you're like, oh, we didn't sort it out. But trying your best to take a deep breath and rethink things and go at it slowly will actually help you feel better in the long run. Because if you come off that call, say if you're in a rush, I know that when I'm in a rush and I'm trying to deal with these difficult situations, I come off the call and I'm like, oh, great. Well, now I feel really bad, you know, because I'd shut them down, or I'd just not done as much as I could have done. And I'm like, dang it, you know, and it really just only ever unfortunately affects you. And it's this massive learning thing. It has to happen a lot of times to I can see Alex nodding. It has to happen a lot of times. But
and dare I say it, that is why we do reflections during training, because it is, I know it's a ball ache to do reflections for portfolio, but there is some, whatever the word is, like
so
behind the madness. There is an importance in pausing to reflect and actually think about what's really gone on there, because we are so fast paced and we're always doing. And then actually when this grievance happens, actually going, okay, what are the other angles of what's going on here? Was it really about me? Was it something that I could have helped? Because you mentioned there that uncertainty, and certainly one of the biggest things during the pandemic was, how do we deal with a sense of overwhelm and uncertainty? And one of the things is thinking about all of the things that are stressing you, whether it's at work, with a supervisor, with exams, or at home with an unwell, you know, whoever, and then writing it all down onto a piece of paper, but putting it into one of 3 circles. So if it's out of your control, within your control, or within your influence. So for example, you know, with the war in Ukraine, I can't control what Putin is doing. I can, you know, I can control how much I'm scrolling through my phone reading about it, and who I'm following, and what sort of social media I'm reading. And I can influence, perhaps if I've got the capacity, you know, raising donations and raising money for charity. But it's about actually starting to, if you have a lot of worries, put them into actually, how much control over this do I have? Because in the NHS, it can be incredibly frustrating. You know, yes, it's a national treasure, but it's not without its flaws, and we know that. And so a lot of the time we can face this bureaucracy, and are we going to let those frustrations take over us to the point where we become one of those cynical doctors? Or are we going to accept that, okay, I don't necessarily have some control. I could have some influence if I have the capacity to join the BMA or the LMC or whatever. Otherwise, I can just focus on my patients, or I can focus on the spare time that I have and making sure I look after my well-being.
Yeah. And with the control as well, just because I don't know if you can tell already for anyone who's been here since the start, but I love having therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy taught me so much. And the first chapter of this book that I went through with my therapist was about control, and the fact we can control our own thoughts. How major is that? And like, it's something that no one ever really teaches you. You know, you don't go to school and learn these things, but the fact that we can decide, or not even control our own thoughts, because thoughts come in and out of our brain, but we can control how we react to the thoughts. We can control whether we give any power to the thoughts. We can control, like, we are way more powerful than life would have it seem. And I think that's so great to realize that, because you're like, oh, I can do this. And, you know, there are moments when you definitely don't feel that. I have many moments when I don't feel like that. But I think as well, having that, yes, you can control your actions, but you can also control how you react to your own brain and what goes on. It's just really cool. And it gives you that, maybe that pause in the difficult situations.
And I think there's something else, thinking back to an event that happened to me years ago, where it was a really difficult situation, and it was being delivered to a group of us by the head honcho. So he was the boss, and he said, this is how it's going to work and whatever. And I thought, that doesn't sound like a very good way of doing it. But I also realized that I wasn't going to say that to him in front of everybody else and create something. So when the meeting was finished, I took the opportunity to go to him afterwards and ask if I could have a word. And we talked about it, and we actually did come to a compromise over what was going to happen. So particularly, I think when you're, you know, dealing with people in a group, sometimes it is about choosing a good moment, and not, again, it's about reflecting before you respond and choosing the moment.
And you've touched there on, in terms of choosing the moment, when you're dealing with a difficult situation, for example, you want to raise an issue. If you are sort of setting a boundary, or someone asks you to do something and you want to say no, you can say no to the task without saying no to the person. So it's the way you phrase things. Often people are pressuring for an answer, and actually you can say, you know, no, but here's another solution, perhaps ask this person, or I know that you need an answer. Can I have a bit more time? You know, by the end of the day, I'll have an answer for you, because people are always, you know, worrying about their own, you know, task list, and therefore it doesn't have to be an immediate yes or no, but it's just giving yourself the space. Remember that you can do that, and putting in those boundaries for that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And even just as a reflection of that onto patient care, my patients love it when I'm like, I'll have no idea. I'll be like talking to them, and I'm like, to be honest, again, honesty, my favorite thing. I'm like, to be honest, I really don't know. But then I say, I follow it up with saying, I'm going to go look that up for you. I'm going to go speak to my colleague. Do you mind if I give you a buzz back? And people are usually so grateful for that, because one, you're being honest, but two, you're showing you care. You don't have to fix things straight away. That's just not real life. Like, that's just how we've been trained in this automatic, quick fire technology world. I totally agree. Like, things don't have to be done straight away, but giving some semblance of that you're going to do something about it, or that you do care, or whatever it is in that moment, can be so useful.
Yeah,
I always get loads of thank yous, and I'm like, guys, I've not done anything yet. Like, don't worry. They're like, thank you so much, and I'm like, oh, okay. Sorry, I haven't actually done it yet, but cool.
But that just shows that it's what's important to them, and feeling heard. I think the last thing I'd touch on with dealing with difficult situations, and this vague sort of picture, and hopefully we're tackling the things that you are all thinking of. If not, please put it in the chat. But you always have choices, and it isn't as rigid as we think. And, you know, you are allowed to take some time, and you are allowed to give yourself a break, and you are allowed to ask and find out how other people have managed with that difficult situation. You know, tying in everything that we've said, you know, get that support. You probably aren't the first person to have faced that situation, so lean into that peer support, and learn from others, because that's the other thing, isn't it? That actually, you know, not only do we not have to face that difficult situation and then work out how to deal with it, but if it's going to happen again, you know, actually, who can I read up on how they've managed something similar, you know, and who can I speak to about managing this situation?
Yes, and I will echo what Steph has just put into the chat, because we're drawing to a close. So we do invite you to comment or to raise anything on anything that we've discussed that you'd like more clarity on, or want to offer something that we haven't touched on that relates to these things, either in the chat or by raising your hand.
Steph, also, someone asked if you scroll through the chat, is that the right book? Amelia has asked regarding the attached book. I've put in I've put in the chat.
Yeah,
that is the one.
Yeah,
I put in the chat
so good.
the name and the author for
Amazing.
Love Languages, if you're interested.
Oh,
and I would also recommend this book, which you may or may not have heard of, Dr. Julie Smith. She's pretty big on social media for making psychology accessible. But she sort of talked about sort of some of the skills that we've mentioned today, and how, you know, they're not just therapy skills, but they're kind of life skills that we're never taught, that are incredibly useful for if we are facing difficulties in our lives.
And
Really
someone has just asked, how does emotional maturity, how does emotional maturity influence how you can respond to these situations, and how to grow into emotional security, maturity? Yeah, and I think it goes to what you referred to, Alex, that we are developing throughout our lives, and actually, and you could say maturing in the sense of getting older, but it is also about remembering, drawing on the experiences, good and bad. What did work? What did give me a good outlook, and how was I then? And that's how I need to be. And when things went wrong, what was it about my response that contributed to the less than good outcomes? So it's about learning from experience.
And also reflecting.
Also reflecting. I do think, though, genuinely, I do think you just, I'm sure everyone can agree with this, you just learn so much more as you get older anyway. But I also think if you put energy and interest into learning about yourself or learning about how other humans work, often you just find really interesting things. There's so many great TED Talks. I love Brené Brown. I don't know if any of you've been interested in that, but she is wonderful and does this amazing, there's this really famous TED Talk on vulnerability. But just learning about these things kind of opens the world in terms of, I wish as a child, this is a totally different topic, but just a quick side note to it. I wish as a child and in school that I'd been taught about mental health and taught about managing my emotions and taught about how to cope with things, because I think my path would have been very different, just in terms of I might have been able to cope with things a little bit better. I might have felt less of an outsider for a lot longer, and it wouldn't have taken me until 27 or however old I was to, you know, have a diagnosis and therefore get support. The support more than the diagnosis was most important for me. But for me, the stigma around mental health kept me back from that so much. And I think, like, when we think about emotional maturity, I hope for people that I think, as we touched on, that people are still enjoying fun, valuing like relaxation. And I've had a few chats with my friends recently, maybe it's because we're all around the 30 age, of just being, because I don't know why life hypes it up so much, but it's very nice, of having that thing of being like, am I actually enjoying myself, or am I just on this treadmill of just one thing after another? And we only live once, and we only get to experience all these great things. And yes, it's not great all the time, but if we can try and make the most of it. And for me, that has been through learning about myself and learning about others and trying to improve relationships and checking in people, you okay docking people and everything else. And like, you know, I think it's so important, and we're all individuals, but the more we can get rid of that stigma around mental health and get rid of the stigma around talking about these kind of things, I think the better for everyone.
And also,
I think that,
I just want to address a comment that's come into the chat about someone who is finding it very difficult to be open with their supervisor because afraid of being judged. And it's being able to talk to someone. I was talking to someone yesterday who was telling me about dreadful experiences that she'd had in her medical training years ago. And she was talking to someone she hadn't met for years, and who actually agreed that that particular department at that time in that place was terrible. And I've talked in the past myself about, I find it very difficult to be honest with so-and-so, and they say, yes, that is the way that person is. It is about him. It's not necessarily.
however, I would say the way, thank you for being honest for once and candid and sharing this with us, Maya. It seems that you have sort of this awareness that actually, you know, they are likely to be supportive. And I think given everything that Steph has just said about, you know, being open, I think it is okay. I think that actually supervisors have received a lot better training. I don't know what field you're in, but you have, you know, made that assessment where you think that actually they would be supportive, and I would sort of advocate for you to be open and honest there. I understand that it is difficult, and if you don't feel comfortable, then I would seek support elsewhere. But hopefully your gut instinct is correct, and they will be supportive because they can offer support. And I don't want you to be suffering at home. You know, if not, then there's Frontline 19 and Duty to Care and UK Doc and your own GP, because as we said, none of us want you to be suffering alone with it, and you are not alone. But I think we are getting over this judgment, and there's a lot of support that your supervisor will be able to offer. And, you know, certainly when I had a bit of time off after Jamie was unwell, you know, they changed my night shifts and changed my weekends and, you know, put me in touch with staff support, psychiatries. I think definitely a supportive
just
field.
To give, because I'm really sorry about this, but I've had a very bad experience. Okay, so yeah, I just
I'm aware.
I think that it's really, thank you so much for sharing, Maya, and I would echo what everyone said, but I also think I've recently had quite a bad experience where it's come back at me and I got unwell. I was encouraged to share about my mental health, and then unfortunately it got thrown back in my face earlier into this training year, and I was treated really badly. And I think that, so I get why that barrier is there, and I also think sometimes it's needed. What I would say is definitely, as Alex said, you're deserving of support. So wherever you get the support from, or wherever you want to get that support from, go for it. Go for what you feel most comfortable with. I think totally, I would love to say that the world is a wonderful place and no one gets judged and there's no stigma and everyone's going to be accepting and every supervisor knows how to deal with it. And I agree in that. I think things are getting better. But I would also say that my personal advice to people if we're talking about these kind of things is share what you need to share to benefit you. So if you don't have to give your whole story. You don't have to give, if they start asking questions that you're not comfortable answering with, that's okay. You set that boundary. But I think if it's affecting your work and you feel that you can kind of say something, oh yeah, Alex has just put on practitioner health program, which is how I got my mental health support and my therapy, the 2 times I had therapy. I just think it's a really personal decision. And I had a horrible experience with it. And I think, unfortunately, that was because I overshared, because I was encouraged once I'd shared the first time because I was so unwell and I had to share. That was great. And I was like, oh, this is great. I'm now getting support. And then unfortunately it got changed around. So I just think you do what is best for you. So, and I would say the less is more in terms of do it depending on what is affecting your work and what help you need. And it might be,
I think the key there is what help you need, because you're right, the educational supervisor is not your counselor. And so unless you do have that very strong bond, it's about how they can support you in training with the time off you need, and then telling them, but I have my GP and practitioner health where I'm receiving support.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, it depends. I mean, obviously, sorry, Maya, we're probably on Maya, we're guessing a little bit as to what's going on, and that's fine. I don't want you to give us any more info or anything, but I think just if you can chat through with a GP or with someone else about what's going on, you'd then maybe even be in a more informed position to be able to say to your supervisor, I've talked to so-and-so, this is how I feel. Would you be able to kind of help me in this respect, or help me get some more support here, or whatever? Because sometimes some of them are amazing, but unfortunately it's not mandatory training. It's hit and miss, and it's not mandatory training for them to know this stuff, which hopefully in the future it will be.
And there is in the chat somebody who's saying they went to somebody else who was much more supportive, which we've been saying. You can look for support. You don't have to depend only on the support that's been allocated to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And things are positive. I know, sorry, I'm really sorry if I put a total down on
No, it's realistic.
Yeah, I think
we have to be realistic about medicine.
And I say, put yourself first in a very violent way. No, I say put yourself first, because if you, unfortunately, the NHS and a lot of places are, not just the NHS, but we're not in a situation where everyone else can put you first. That's just, there's work stresses, there's understaffing, that, there's so many factors that go with it. And so look, if you can put yourself first, that's like a way of, and then hopefully things will change. And I mean, I'm sure UK Doc are going to be a big part of that, because hopefully we're reducing the stigma and getting people to be more open, and but I wouldn't want that to sacrifice your experiences or be a detriment. So I just wanted to mention, because I am
aware that we've got to 8:30, and we said we'd run to 8:30. Well, there is another something in the chat.
I mean, I think someone just put why these roles given to people who aren't interested in supporting. I think it's a really tricky one, and I think probably the answer to that is just that there's not, supervisor was never really seen as needing to support with mental health, because I think we just didn't talk about it. So I think for a lot of people who are in these supervisor roles, who have been in them for a very long time, it maybe started in a place where mental health just wasn't communicated about, it was hidden away. And I think it's just about trying to adapt to those times. And I mean, definitely I agree, call it out, but then I would also just say, do what's best for you, because I just think everyone deserves to look after themselves. And I think that is what I would always advocate. If it's going to put you in a really awful position to like act on something, then don't, just look after yourself. It's my advice.
And mine would be where you have capacity. Is this the hill you want to stick your flag in? Because things are changing, Phil. I've ran training for clinical supervisors. And the other thing is, they don't, just because they're more senior, they don't necessarily have this magic box of extra resilience to manage things. And we've all been through this pandemic together and are all quite burnt out and exhausted to some extent, and at different paces and at different stages through that recovery. But now things are changing. The silver lining of COVID is that it's shone a spotlight on the well-being of healthcare professionals, and so there is more of a lean towards actually checking in and how are you managing this workload with the understaffing and the lack of resources, and appraisals are more focused on well-being and what have you learned, what have you achieved, what's going well, what's not, how can we support you in this, and there's more on supported return to training and other training schemes having time off. So hopefully things are changing, but it
and
does
just
take
to
time.
emphasize what you said, Alex, and what we've been talking about quite a lot in this talk is that it's often not the supervisor, it's often not to do with, it's definitely not to do with you, and it's often even not, it's not that they don't want to help, it's just that they don't have the capacity. So either they don't have the knowledge. I know for me, for one, if someone asks me a question and I have no knowledge, my immediate instinct, which I've learned to overcome, is to go, oh, no, stay away, nothing to do with me, because I'm a perfectionist and I have anxiety and I don't want to deal with things that I can't fix. And I think I've seen that, I've seen that firsthand, the supervisors that have brushed me off or have treated me maybe the way that I wouldn't want to be treated. Often you can see how maybe they've got their own stuff going on, and that is not to excuse anything, but I think it's just to be realistic, as we said, and things are getting better.
Yeah, find the nice ones as well, as someone mentioned.
So on that note, I think we should draw it to a close. We're running a bit over time. I'd like to thank you both, Stephanie and Alex, for making this such an interactive mini conference, and for all the people in the audience, for attending, but also for giving us your thoughts and comments. Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll see some or all of you again at a future date.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a lovely rest of the week.
Bye.